Robert F. Kennedy Jr. continues to be a thorn in both Democrats and Republicans' side, but per new polling, the spoiler candidate is having a growing impact on President Biden's support. The survey released this week shows RFK Jr. polling at 22% in a hypothetical three-way matchup against Biden and former President Donald Trump. What's more, he's gaining among independents.
Per the Quinnipiac University survey, the former Democratic candidate, now running as an independent, scored a plurality among independent voters, taking a stunning 36% support compared to Trump and Biden's 31% and 30% respectively.
Washington Post reporter Aaron Blake wrote a column last week that asserted third-party candidates usually poll better than they perform, the operative word here being usually. Yesterday, in a post on X, Blake wrote, quote, "Last week, I wrote about how RFK and Cornel West combining for 17% in a poll was unusual. Only one poll since the 1990s had third-party candidates polled like that. Per my review today, a poll shows them combining for 25%.
Here to join our discussion is Spencer Brown, managing editor of Town Hall. We didn't think 3 people was quite enough, so now we've got 4. And we would have had you in studio, but we don't have enough literal, actual cameras. So thank you for joining us remotely, Spencer.
Of course, happy to be here, or there, kind of here.
Here, kind of. So I'll kick it over to you first. What do you make of RFK's shift from being within the, ostensibly challenging Biden in the Democratic Party primaries to now being a general election candidate?
I mean, it's definitely been interesting to see how the polling has changed, as everybody, I think, has been watching this, both Republicans and Democrats. Everybody's been worried about which side he would eat more support away from. And as polls like this keep showing, people are generally, those who support Trump at least, are generally more sort of, they're going to die with that choice. They're not going to change their mind. So he's not really eating into the Trump supporters. But I do think on the Republican side, people who are never Trumpers or who just want another option, that's where that support's coming from. On the Democrat side, of course, the DNC is not running a primary. They're not doing debates. They're just sort of, leaving Biden out there to fend for himself. And you see him losing a lot more support because people do just want someone other than President Biden because he's both failed to deliver on his promises in 2020 and has continued to sort of give up on the items that maybe some of the progressive left may have supported him for. He just continues to roll back on those too.
Yeah, I am confused. I'm curious about what the appeal here is for RFK Jr. specifically at this point. I saw a poll in an article talking about the Arab American vote and how Joe Biden is losing it, how he got, I believe, 58% of the Arab American vote in 2020. It's now down to 17% of Arab Americans who say they're going to vote for him now. Now, when you do the breakdown of what Arab Americans are thinking about currently, 25% say they're undecided. 13.7% say they'd support RFK Jr., while only 3.8% say they'd support Cornel West. Now, Cornel West is the only one in the race, and the only candidate in the race who has what I would describe as the most vocal, unequivocal, supportive position, pro-Palestine position in the race. What do you make of those numbers, Jessica, as you look at Arab Americans looking for somewhere else to go, but seemingly landing more on RFK Jr., who has a pretty establishment position on Israel, versus Cornel West?
Yeah, that's shocking to me. I really wonder about why a population of voters is deemed to be fought between if they're choosing an independent over Biden or Donald Trump. 60% of the electorate turns out for general elections. So when I think about this, it's like, okay, there's 40% of the voting population that is gettable. And they're usually not participating. And so why is it that the voting class, I would say, is siding with RFK Jr. over Cornel West? And I think it might be because Cornel West was firmly in the Bernie camp. Maybe they see him more as a Democrat who is running with an independent party now. Maybe they see him as someone who's overly intellectual, who will ultimately not end up taking action as necessary when it comes to fighting Islamophobia at home and also, abroad, making sure that U.S. interests reflect their interests, right? There's a war in the Middle East right now that's definitely on their minds. Why are they going for someone like RFK Jr.? He did say some anti-interventionist stuff initially, but it's not carrying over to Israel. And I think that's what a lot of what will come out about RFK Jr. in the coming days and months. Spencer, I wanted to ask you, what do you think RFK Jr. is bringing to the table that the other candidates are not? Why do you think people are leaving Joe Biden and Trump's camp for RFK Jr.?
Well, on the Biden side, I think it makes a little bit more sense because he's somebody who, again, has a lot of positions that align with Democrat policy positions, even though that might not be, sort of the most vocal wing of the Democratic Party. A lot of what he says is in line with that and is less so in line with the Republican Party. I think he got a lot of attention from the right for his stance on COVID vaccines. He's gotten a lot of attention for his sort of the more the left has gone after him and tried to, censor him and what he had to say. We saw that congressional hearing earlier this year that sort of put that on full display. And I think anybody who's being attacked that much by Democrats and the left kind of Republicans take note of. But I think as people understand more of what his policies are, they realize his, as far as conservative portfolio is a lot smaller than things that he says that are more in line with what Democrats think. I do think, he has tried to make his campaign about how he's specifically appealing to people who are upset with Joe Biden, how he's this fit guy, he can do push-up contests, he can do all these things that Joe Biden could never do. But that's not really, in my mind, a good argument for why somebody should be president. It's good to be in good health and physically fit, but that is not something that I think a lot of people necessarily will cast their vote solely based on. But then again, when you have Joe Biden, the contrast is definitely there. It's interesting to see, though, how his positions, like you were saying, on the interventionism and things like that have changed and ebbed and flowed a little. I think he's still trying to figure out some of his positions as he tries to find a lane in this, because, again, he's not the only one running as a third party. He's running against Joe Biden, Donald Trump. He's got Cornel West. Dean Phillips is now running as a Democrat, supposedly against Joe Biden. So it's very crowded. And I think he's trying to figure out how he can differentiate himself enough to draw votes, but he needs to figure out whose votes he can actually draw out of, whether it's the 40% you were talking about, Jessica, or the existing 60% that already would vote.
If COVID was looming larger right now, I think there'd be a stronger case for him peeling off Trump people. It is the case that the only time Trump gets booed at his own rallies is when he talks about his handling of COVID, specifically the vaccine. So, and given that that was, kind of the major RFK issue, certainly one that attracted a lot of conservative, independent, populist support, I could see some people had it with Trump on that issue, voting for him. Of course, COVID is a little bit much more on the background now than it was prior. Vaccine requirements are mostly not in place except on certain college campuses, where I think it's ridiculous that they have them, but they do have them. Also, as a general principle, we have to keep in mind that the polling for the independent candidates or the third-party candidates, I remember being very high in many news cycles and then petering away like right before Election Day. I believe in 2016, Trump and Clinton, at that time, Gary Johnson, who was the Libertarian Party candidate, not a particularly strong candidate, but a Libertarian Party candidate nonetheless, was for a while polling pretty high. And if his vote total had matched his poll numbers, it would have been the best finish for the Libertarian Party ever. It still was the best finish for the Libertarian Party ever, but the final tally wasn't anywhere close to the best polling. So I feel like there's some psychological effect where at the last minute, voters who say they're going to vote third party or independent feel guilted into it and say, well, my state is too close, I have to,
Well, they're actively guilted into it by the establishment media. Before we wrap, we should note that this Quinnipiac poll also has Marianne Williamson holding at 8% of the vote, at 16% among Democratic leading voters. The question that was asked was, if the election were to be held today and the Democratic candidates were Joe Biden, Marianne Williamson, Cenk Uygur, and Dean Phillips, for whom would you vote? And Williamson is number 2 among that batch. Is there a lane for her, do you think, at this point, Jessica?
I don't know. There could be. I think it's important that she's in the race for the purpose of demonstrating how the Democratic Party will push out any candidate that is not aligned with the establishment. That's not new information for a lot of us. But when we think about, Cornel West choosing to run as an independent, RFK Jr. making the jump to run as an independent shortly after he gets poor treatment, I think it's important that we have a progressive in there just to show what the Democratic Party's intentions are and demonstrate that there is a base of progressives that are sticking with the Democratic Party, and they like candidates like Marianne Williamson.
Well, we'll continue to hear from all of these candidates, and we'll have more rising right after this.